Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex source material, academic stuff, cultural guides, you name it, and we really try to pull out the actionable knowledge you need. And today, we're on, well, let's call it a meticulous anthropological mission. We are diving deep into British politeness, that intricate, nuanced, sometimes just baffling social tapestry.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's less about optional good manners, and much more a kind of foundational social contract. It binds things together.
Right.
And if you're an outsider, or maybe just new to the UK, it can seem quite charming at first glance. All that cueing, the constant sorries.
Yeah, quaint even.
Exactly. But beneath that surface, there's this, well, rigid and often totally unspoken code. It dictates everything. How close you stand to someone, how you signal you're done eating. It's pervasive.
And that's our goal today.
Right.
We're not just listing rules of good behavior. We want you, the listener, to actually master the tools you need for social navigation over there. Think of this as your shortcut, really. Understanding the deep cultural values driving this whole system so you can move through UK society smoothly, confidently.
And without causing that dreaded social offense. That fuss.
Exactly, the fuss. Avoid the fuss.
That ability to navigate smoothly, to not create a fuss, that's really the prize, isn't it? We want to unlock the hidden meanings behind all those daily, seemingly tiny interactions.
Yeah.
Because if you understand the code, you don't constantly feel like you need a cultural translator standing next to you.
Okay, so to kick off that journey, we have to focus on what our sources call the sacred trinity. 3 simple words, but incredibly powerful. They're like the structural core of the whole thing. Sorry, please, and thank you.
Absolutely central. And they're not just, tacked onto sentences. They are the essential lubricant for pretty much all successful social interaction in the UK.
Lubricant. I like that.
Yeah, they manage expectations. They diffuse potential arguments before they even start. They signal respect. People use them dozens of times a day, often without even thinking.
So we've got the full playbook today. We're going to cover the specific, almost grammatical rules of cueing.
Oh, the cue. Yes.
Deciphering that tricky art of understatement, nailing down the crucial details of pub etiquette, and importantly, tracing it all back. Where does that famous British Reserve actually come from?
It's going to be quite a journey.
All right, let's unpack this system piece by piece. Okay, let's start with, well, probably the most famous one. The word our sources call the most versatile, maybe even pathologically overused in the whole British lexicon. Sorry. I mean, the legend is true, right? People really do say it constantly, often in situations where, frankly, nobody else in the world would think an apology is needed.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
It genuinely is the Swiss Army knife of British apologies.
Yeah.
And the statistic is, well, it's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it.
What is it again?
Research suggests the average Brit says sorry something like 8 times a day. 8 times.
Wow.
And like you said, the vast majority of those aren't for, genuine serious wrongdoing. They're social tools. They serve specific functions.
Right. It's the sheer range of uses that needs unpacking. Let me break down the 3 main functions we pulled from the sources. First up, function A, the preemptive apology.
Yes. This is the sorry you say before any offense has actually happened, simply because you might be about to inconvenience someone, even in the tiniest way.
Give us an example.
Okay, imagine you need to squeeze past someone in a narrow shop aisle. Or you need to stop a stranger on a busy street to ask for directions. You start with, sorry, excuse me. Or perhaps, sorry, but do you have the time?
Right, but you haven't actually done anything wrong yet.
Exactly. That initial sorry isn't an admission of guilt for asking the question or needing to get past. It's actually a profound signal of respect.
How so? What's it signaling?
It's acknowledging the interruption you're about to cause. You're basically saying up front, look, I recognize you're busy, I value your time and space, and I regret this brief imposition, but I need something. It softens the whole interaction. It's like social armor, ensuring you approach from a position of deference. It just lowers the barrier for them to help you.
It's almost like asking for permission to interrupt.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
It ensures they don't feel ambushed by your request, which leads nicely into function B, the reflexive acknowledgement. This is the one people often find, well, quintessentially British and maybe a bit awkward.
The double sorry scenario.
That's the one. Happens all the time. Think crowded pavement, busy tube station. 2 people have a tiny collision, barely brush shoulders, maybe hesitate in a doorway at the same time. What happens? Both immediately recoil slightly and apologize simultaneously. Sorry. Oh, so sorry. My fault.
Even though, like you said, neither person is really at fault. It was just an accident. Mutual.
Precisely. It's moved way beyond accepting blame here. The core purpose is maintaining social harmony. It's acknowledging that shared moment of awkwardness that comes with, public closeness.
And it links back to that aversion to causing a fuss.
Absolutely. The cultural avoidance of confrontation or making a scene is incredibly strong. That quick, reflexive sorry acts like a rapid system reset. It signals, no harm done, no need to escalate this. We both acknowledge the slight bump and we move on.
It just smooths things over instantly.
Instantly. De-escalates any potential tiny flicker of tension. Ensures the public space stays calm and, well, orderly.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how much social traffic management that one little word does. Okay, function C.
Function C, expressing empathy. And here, sorry, takes on a completely different role, totally separate from fault or inconvenience.
How does that work?
Well, if someone shares some bad news with you, maybe a bereavement, losing a job, even just a minor disappointment, like their team losing the immediate standard, almost required responses, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward. But how does it connect to the bigger picture, the code of reserve?
Because it's incredibly efficient compassion. It's a quick, effective way to show sympathy and care without needing to launch into a big, possibly awkward emotional display yourself.
Right.
Given that culture of the stiff upper lip, which we'll definitely get into more later, where you generally avoid showing too much emotion publicly, the simple, I'm so sorry, lets you show that human connection, that empathy, while still maintaining your own personal reserve. It ticks the box without demanding a huge emotional outpouring.
So just to recap, sorry. It's interruption management, it's conflict avoidance, and it's emotional acknowledgement.
All packed into 5 letters. It's
Right.
doing a lot of heavy lifting
Right.
up.
That's a huge amount of cultural weight.
Right.
Let's move to the second pillar of this trinity. Please. Now, this is where the code seems to get really rigid. Our sources basically say, omit please at your social peril.
Oh, absolutely. Forgetting please is a big one. If you make a request without it, it's almost instantly heard as a demand, not a request.
Really? Even for small things?
Even for small things, it'll likely meet a distinctly cool reception. Kids are taught from day one that please is the magic word, and that principle carries right through into adulthood. It's fundamental.
Why is it so indispensable? I mean, we use please in many cultures, but why is leaving it out in the UK apparently so much worse than, say, in the US or Canada?
Well, the core function, I think, is that please acknowledges the other person's agency, their freedom to choose.
Agency, how do you mean?
When you say please, you're implicitly recognizing their right to refuse your request, even if functionally they probably won't or can't, like a barista making your coffee.
Ah, I see.
If you just walk up and say, give me a coffee,
Yeah.
you're essentially treating them like a machine, a resource you're entitled to use. You're ignoring their personhood in that moment.
And that sense of entitlement is the breach of politeness.
That's it exactly. Leaving it out when you order food or ask a shop assistant for help or even just ask a colleague for a bit of their time, it comes across as abrupt, demanding, frankly, just rude. You're skipping that vital moment of mutual recognition and deference that's expected.
And the sources mentioned there's even a subtlety in how you use please. It's not just about remembering it, but where you put it actually changes the flavor a bit.
Yes, absolutely. The placement is another layer of that British nuance. It subtly adjusts the tone of the request.
Okay, break that down.
Right. So the standard, most neutral, polite way usually puts it at the end. Could you pass the salt, please? Smooth, balanced, standard politeness.
Got it.
Now, if you shift it to the front, please could you pass the salt? That subtly changes the emphasis.
How does it feel different? A bit more insistent, maybe?
Yeah, maybe slightly more insistent, or perhaps just foregrounding the politeness a bit more. It can signal a slightly greater need, maybe a touch more urgency, but still very polite.
Okay.
Then you have the most direct version. Pass the salt, please. Now, this is still usually fine in informal settings because the please is still there doing its magic. It rescues it from being a bold command.
So even the placement lets you fine-tune the request along a spectrum.
Exactly. You're managing the gradient between asking, gently urging, and softening a direct instruction, all with where you stick that one crucial word.
Fascinating. Okay, that brings us to pillar number 3. Thank you. This sounds like the non-negotiable bookend to actually receiving something.
Absolutely non-negotiable. If sorry often starts the interaction with deference, thank you must conclude it with acknowledgement. It's the closing bracket.
And it applies to pretty much anything.
Anything. Someone holds a door open for you, thank you. Receive a compliment, thank you. Get handed a cup of tea, given directions, pass the salt you just asked for. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And failing to say it is bad.
It's a significant social misstep, sometimes deeply felt. It's interpreted immediately as ingratitude, maybe even suggesting you weren't raised properly. Leaves a really negative impression.
And the classic, almost iconic example of this reflexive gratitude, the one you see every single day, is the bus driver thing.
Ah, yes, the uniquely British phenomenon of the collective chorus of "thank you, driver," or just "cheers, driver," as people get off the bus.
Even though, as the sources point out, they've paid for the service, they're not getting a free ride.
Exactly. You're often getting off of the back doors, maybe halfway down the bus, but people will still call out their thanks towards the front.
Why? Why does that persist? Is it just habit?
I think it's more than habit. It's a really powerful little gesture of recognition.
Yeah.
It goes beyond the purely transactional.
How so?
It's acknowledging the driver's humanity, their role, their effort in getting everyone around safely. In a small way, it fosters this momentary sense of community, of mutual visibility, in a world where service workers can often feel unseen.
Right.
It's just that brief acknowledgement that the interaction, however mundane, was completed with respect.
And just like with sorry, the British seem to love layering their gratitude too, don't they? Signaling different levels of thanks.
Oh, definitely. You've got your standard thank you, then you can escalate to thank you very much, or the slightly warmer thanks so much, and then there's the incredibly versatile, common, casual cheers.
Cheers does a lot of work too, doesn't it?
It really does. Cheers can mean thank you, but it can also mean goodbye, or I agree with that, or even to your health when drinking. Its function is almost entirely relational. It signals the interaction was friendly, positive, and concluded well.
So mastering the Trinity isn't just about using the words.
No, it's about understanding their weight, their function, and knowing how and when to deploy them appropriately. Getting the proportion right is key.
Okay, we've got the basic vocabulary nailed down. Now we need to shift gears and look at the actions, the physical stuff, behaviors, the unwritten social rules. And where else could we possibly start but with the absolute bedrock institution of British public life, the sanctity of the queue?
Ah, the queue, yes. If you ever want to see the British public's collective moral compass instantly activated, just watch what happens when someone tries to jump a queue.
It's more than just waiting in line, isn't it? It's
Oh, no,
deeper.
much deeper.
Hmm.
To queue is to wait in an orderly line, yes, but it's a social rule observed with almost religious seriousness. It fundamentally embodies the national commitment to fairness.
The sources literally call queue jumping or pushing in a grave social transgression. That's strong language. It suggests it's way more than just being a bit rude.
It is intensely serious business because it violates that deep, deep cultural contract of fairness. The principle of first come, first served isn't just a suggestion. It underpins how public space is managed.
How so?
The unspoken agreement is, we will all endure this inconvenience together, equally, and in the correct order. The person who tries to cheat that system isn't just being impatient. They're seen as undermining the entire social order in that moment. It's fundamentally unfair.
And the reaction, it's usually not shouting, is it? That would be causing a fuss.
Precisely. The punishment is usually delivered through highly effective, controlled social disapproval. You get the tutting sound, that sharp intake of breath through pursed lips.
As a tut.
You get the glare, that withering, laser-focused look of utter condemnation. And sometimes, the politely devastating quiet but firm reprimand.
Like what?
Something delivered very calmly like, "Excuse me, I believe the back of the queue is over there." Or, "Sorry, were you actually waiting here?" Delivered quietly, but oh, the social weight behind it is immense.
So the aim is to correct the behavior while maintaining your own composure. You uphold the rule without breaking the other rule about avoiding public confrontation.
Exactly. You meet the transgression with a response that reinforces the decision without causing undue disruption. And crucially, you have to understand that these queues form for almost anything.
Gives us the range?
Obvious ones, bus stops, shop checkouts, ATMs, airport security, but also less obvious ones, post offices, waiting for a taxi, sometimes even just waiting to look at something in a museum.
Right.
And even in places where a neat physical line is impossible, like a really crowded pub bar, there's still an invisible queue, a kind of mental ordering system.
How does that work?
Experienced bartenders are absolute masters at scanning the crowd, mentally logging who arrived when, who's next, and trying to violate that recognized order by, say, waving cash in the air or shouting your order over other people is seen as just as offensive as physically cutting in line. You must respect the order, whether it's visible or invisible.
That deep respect for order and fairness seems to lead directly into the next point, the importance of personal space and contact.
Yes, they're closely linked. The British, generally speaking, value their personal bubble quite significantly. They tend to maintain a greater physical distance during conversations compared to, say, Mediterranean or Latin American cultures.
So if you're talking to someone, what's the safe distance? What should you aim for?
A good rule of thumb is about an arm's length. That tends to be the comfortable, default conversational distance.
And what happens if you stand closer?
You'll probably notice the British person instinctively take a small step back to reestablish that distance. If you then step forward again, closing the gap, well, that's when you start being perceived as intrusive, maybe a bit aggressive, or just culturally unaware. It makes people uncomfortable.
And how does this preference for distance play out in greetings?
Well, in formal settings, or when meeting someone for the first time professionally, a firm but brief handshake is the standard. Note the brief part, holding on too long, or being overly enthusiastic with the pumping action, can feel a bit unsettling.
Okay, what about hugging?
Hugging is generally reserved for close friends and family, and often, even then, only after the relationship is quite well established. Trying to hug a new acquaintance or a business contact would be seen as a major boundary violation. Very awkward.
And this respect for physical boundaries extends even onto crowded public transport, like the tube.
Oh, absolutely, especially on the tube. People become masters of spatial awareness, angling their bodies, holding bags in front of them, all to minimize accidental physical contact. And crucially, you avoid making eye contact.
Why no eye contact?
Prolonged eye contact with strangers in confined public spaces like that can be easily misinterpreted as aggression, maybe romantic interest, or just plain weirdness. The default behavior is quiet, reserved anonymity. You pretend the other person isn't really there.
Okay, so you're maintaining distance, avoiding eye contact. How do the British fill the potential awkward silences without actually getting too close? Through the art of small talk.
Small talk is absolutely paramount. It's that seemingly trivial surface-level conversation that serves the very serious function of oiling the social wheels. It breaks the ice, establishes a comfortable, non-committal atmosphere. It provides a safe, immediate social context.
And the number one universally safe go-to topic is?
The weather. Always the weather.
Why?
Yeah.
Why is the weather so central to British small talk?
Because it's the perfect neutral territory. It's constantly changing. Everyone experiences it. It affects everyone, but requires zero personal or emotional investment to discuss.
Right.
You can comment on the rain, the sun, the cold, the unexpected heat wave. Bit chilly for June, isn't it? Yes, awful, isn't it? Still, the garden needs the rain. Exchange complete. Rapport established, however minimally. Social contract fulfilled. No vulnerability required.
Beyond the weather, what other topics are generally safe for this kind of light chat?
Generally things that are low stakes and easily shared. Sport is usually safe, especially football, rugby, cricket, depending on the season and who you're talking to. Vague comments about popular television shows can work. Very general, non-specific weekend plans. Doing anything nice this weekend?
Yeah.
Oh, just pottering about, that kind of thing. Requires only a surface-level response.
Okay, now crucially, the avoidance list. What topics are absolutely off limits for small talk, especially with people you don't know well? The social landmines.
You absolutely must avoid the big three: salary, religion, and politics, especially with new acquaintances or in professional settings.
Why are they so taboo?
Because they're seen as far too personal, potentially divisive, and just too deep for the light, friendly, atmosphere-building function of small talk. Bringing them up signals that you fundamentally misunderstand the purpose of the interaction,
Which is?
which is simply to establish a pleasant, non-threatening connection, not to have an intense debate or pry into someone's private life or deeply held beliefs. You risk causing that dreaded fuss or discomfort.
This careful avoidance of anything potentially awkward or confrontational leads us neatly into perhaps the trickiest bit for outsiders. Understatement and indirectness. You constantly feel like you need a translation guide.
Ah, yes. This is where British communication can feel like trying to crack a code. Understatement is absolutely rife. If you take what a British person says literally, especially when they're giving an opinion or feedback, you will almost certainly misunderstand the actual meaning.
Why? Why this reliance on not saying what you mean?
It's a core component of politeness, again linked to avoiding confrontation or causing offense, and also modesty.
Okay, let's run through some essential translations, the ones that trip people up constantly.
Right. Let's start with praise or positive feedback. If a Brit describes something, You've done a meal you cooked, a report you wrote as not bad or quite good.
That sounds lukewarm.
To an outsider, yes. But in British English, not bad often actually means very good. It's high praise delivered through a filter of deliberate modesty, saying, wow, this is amazing. Might feel a bit too effusive, a bit embarrassing.
Okay, so not bad. Good. What about criticism?
This is where it gets dangerous. If someone says, that's an interesting approach, especially with a slight pause.
Oh, dear. Interesting. It's never good, is it?
Rarely. It very often means I completely disagree with that and frankly think it's a terrible idea, but I'm too polite to say so directly. It's disagreement masked as thoughtful consideration.
That's a crucial one to decode. Any others?
A very common one, especially in a work context, is when someone in authority responds to your suggestion with, okay, thank you, I'll bear it in mind.
Which sounds like they're going to consider it.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
But the functional translation you absolutely need to hear is, I have absolutely no intention of doing that, I may have already forgotten it, and the discussion on this topic is now closed. It's polite dismissal.
Wow. So why? Why is this indirectness, this constant understatement, so deeply ingrained?
It links back to those key cultural values we've touched on. Firstly, modesty, avoiding any hint of boastfulness or arrogance. Making strong, positive statements about oneself or even others can feel immodest.
Okay.
And secondly, and probably more importantly, it's about politeness through conflict avoidance. The British generally prefer to imply criticism, hint at bad news, or gently suggest disagreement, rather than stating it baldly and risking making the other person feel uncomfortable or defensive.
So the more sensitive the topic?
The more likely it is that the language used will become even more understated and indirect. It's a way of softening the blow.
Right. We've covered the core language and the underlying social principles. Now let's look at how this all plays out in specific situations, specific arenas, starting with somewhere often quite formal, dining etiquette. British table manners, they still feel quite traditional, don't they?
They really do. They definitely echo a more formal era. But many of the core principles remain firmly in place. They signal refinement, control, consideration for others at the table.
And the sources highlight one area as absolutely crucial for anyone wanting to fit in: utensil mastery. The rules are apparently very specific.
Extremely specific and
Yeah.
very visually distinct if you know what you're looking for. It's one of the quickest ways people unconsciously judge table manners.
Okay, lay out the main rules for us.
The absolute fundamental rule, the one you really mustn't break, is the knife stays in the right hand, the fork stays in the left hand throughout the entire meal.
You don't switch them back and forth like in some American styles?
Absolutely not. Knife always right, fork always left. And generally, the fork stays with the tines pointing downwards towards the plate.
And how do you actually eat with them like that?
The knife is used primarily for cutting, obviously, but also, very importantly, it's used to gently push food onto the back of the fork. You generally don't spear things aggressively with the fork.
Onto the back of the fork.
Onto the back of the fork,
Yeah.
yes, which is then lifted carefully to the mouth. It's a very controlled, deliberate motion. You can almost see it as a physical manifestation of that cultural reserve we talked about.
That's a great way to put it. Controlling your utensils shows you're in control, period. What about napkins?
Napkin rules are simpler, but just as firm. As soon as you sit down, the napkin goes onto your lap.
Not tucked into your collar.
Never, ever tucked into the collar. No matter how potentially messy the food might be, that scene is very uncouth. And if you need to leave the table briefly during the meal, you place your napkin loosely on your chair, not on the table.
Okay. And the rhythm of the meal itself. Starting to eat, respecting others.
Patience is key. You must wait until everyone at the table has been served their food before you take your first bite. Unless the host explicitly tells you to start. Often they'll say, please don't wait, yours will get cold.
Right.
And they might have to say it a couple times before you politely accept.
Right.
And while it's pretty universal, it bears repeating. Chewing with your mouth open or making loud eating noises is considered extremely rude in the UK. Very bad form.
What if you need something from the other side of the table? The salt, the bread basket.
Definitely do not reach across the table, especially not across someone else's place setting. That's a major intrusion into their space.
So what do you do?
You politely ask for the item to be passed, using the magic words, of course. A simple, could you possibly pass the bread basket, please? Works perfectly.
Okay. And finally, how do you signal you're finished? The silent cue to the waiting staff.
Yes, this is important nonverbal communication. When you've finished eating, you place your knife and fork parallel to each other on the plate.
How? Side by side.
Side by side, roughly in the center of the plate, handles pointing towards you, maybe angled slightly as if pointing to the 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock position. Crucially, the fork tines should be facing upwards.
Fork tines up when finished.
Yes, tines up when finished. This clearly signals to the server that you're done. If your cutlery is left crossed on the plate or resting on the sides, it means you're just taking a pause and haven't finished yet.
Got it. Okay, from the potentially formal dinner table, let's shift to the great informal social hub. Pub etiquette. The British pub. Relaxed vibe, but still a code, right?
Absolutely. The pub is such a cornerstone of British social life. It's generally relaxed, yes, but it has its own very specific, often unwritten code of conduct. And this is where newcomers often make mistakes, assuming, say, American bar rules or European cafe rules apply.
Okay, rule number one seems to be about ordering. How does that work?
In the vast majority of traditional pubs, you order everything drinks and usually food directly at the bar. You go up to the bar to place your order and pay.
No table service.
Table service for drinks is quite rare. You might find it in posher gastropubs or hotel bars, but in a standard local pub, you go to the bar. That's the system.
And how do you get served at a busy bar? You mentioned the invisible queue earlier.
Right. You need to approach the bar, find a space, and patiently try to catch the bartender's eye. Respect the invisible queue. Try and gauge who was there before you.
And what should you absolutely not do?
Don't wave money in the air. Don't tap coins on the bar. And definitely do not shout, "Oi," or whistle to get attention.
Why not?
It's seen as incredibly rude, aggressive, and disrespectful, both to the bar staff and the other customers. It violates the expected public reserve. You wait your turn, make polite eye contact, and when the bartender acknowledges you, you give your order clearly and efficiently. And always use.
Please.
Always use, please. A pint of bitter and a packet of crisps, please.
Okay. Now let's talk about something that sounds quite socially complex. The round system. Buying rounds of drinks.
Ah, yes, the round. This is a fundamental, unwritten law of social drinking in groups in the UK. If you're out with friends or colleagues, it's customary and basically mandatory, if you want to stay friends or colleagues, to take turns buying a drink for everyone in the group.
Everyone, even if it's a big group.
Usually, yes, within reason. If it's a huge group, it might split into smaller rounds. But the principle is sharing the buying. It creates this system of reciprocity and ensures everyone contributes fairly over the course of the evening.
What's the social significance? Why is it so important?
It creates a kind of temporary social contract, a mini debt system. If you accept a drink bought by someone in their round, you are implicitly agreeing to buy the next round when your turn comes.
And leaving before it's your turn.
That is considered very bad form. Highly impolite, sometimes seen as actively insulting or cheap. You're seen as taking advantage of others' generosity. You really should try to stay until you've bought your round and settled that social debt before you leave the group.
Right, okay. And what about tipping the bartender? Is that expected?
Tipping bar staff isn't generally expected in the same way it might be in North America. Bar staff are paid a wage. However, if you've received particularly good service, or maybe you're a regular, it's certainly appreciated.
And there's a specific polite way to do it.
Yes, the classic polite way is, when you're paying for your round, to say to the bartender, "And one for yourself," or "And get one for yourself."
What does that mean exactly?
It means you're telling them to add the price of a drink. Often they'll interpret that as maybe the price of a pint, or just add a few pounds onto your bill. That extra amount is effectively their cash tip, which they'll take later.
Ah, so it's indirect. Avoids the awkwardness of handing over cash.
Exactly. It keeps the interaction friendly and avoids a direct money transaction for the tip, which can feel a bit transactional or even slightly demeaning in that context. It's a gesture of goodwill.
Okay, moving on to just basic personal interactions, greetings and introductions. Back to reserve again.
Fundamentally, yes, especially in more formal situations or when meeting people for the first time. The standard greeting is that firm, brief handshake we mentioned.
And using names.
Crucially, you need to respect hierarchy and formality until you're explicitly invited not to. Use titles and last names, Mr. Smith, Dr. Evans, Professor Jones, Mrs. Patel, until the person says, "Oh, please call me David," or "Sarah is fine."
Don't just jump straight to first names.
No, definitely not in a formal or professional context. That can be seen as overly familiar or disrespectful. Wait for the invitation.
And what about informal greetings? Between friends or more casual acquaintances?
Usually just a simple hello or hi or all right. Physical contact is generally minimal. A hug or maybe a quick peck on the cheek might happen between very close friends or family members, but it's certainly not universal and depends very much on the individuals and the social circle.
So err on the side of less contact.
Always safer to err on the side of less physical contact initially. Let the other person initiate if they're huggers.
Okay, this seems like the perfect time to address the infamous "how are you" trap. This trips up so many people from cultures where that question is a genuine inquiry.
It's possibly the single most critical communication nuance to grasp. When someone in the UK asks, how are you, or all right, or you okay,
Mm.
especially in passing, or at the start of a brief interaction, it is almost always a rhetorical greeting, a conversational lubricant.
Not a genuine question about your well-being.
Almost never. It's not an invitation to provide a detailed, honest update on your health, your mood, your life's problems. It's more like saying hello.
So what is the expected response? There's a script.
All right, there's absolutely a script, and you deviate from it at your peril. The standard expected response is some variation of, fine, thank you, and you, or very well, thanks, how are you, or even just, good, thanks, you.
That's it.
That's it. The purpose is just to acknowledge the greeting and return it, keeping the conversation light and moving smoothly.
And what happens if you do give an honest, detailed answer? Well, actually, my back's been playing up. I'm worried about.
You commit a fairly significant social faux pas. You break the unwritten rule.
Why is honesty considered impolite in this context?
Because you're violating the norms of small talk, and more deeply, the cultural preference for reserve. You're essentially forcing the other person into a deeper, more emotionally involved conversation than they signed up for with their ritual greeting.
You're making them deal with your stuff.
Exactly. You're potentially burdening them with information they didn't ask for and might feel awkward responding to. You're creating that fuss, that social discomfort, by oversharing emotionally in a context that demands lightness. Keep it brief, keep it positive, return the question. That's the formula.
Right. Okay, lastly in this section, let's touch on the professional sphere. Business etiquette. How does politeness translate here?
Well, all the principles we've discussed, reserve, formality, understatement, are very much present in British business culture, perhaps even amplified sometimes.
What's paramount?
Punctuality. Being on time is absolutely critical. Lateness is seen as highly unprofessional and disrespectful of other people's time, which is fundamentally impolite.
What if you are going to be late?
You must let the person know as soon as possible, apologize sincerely, that preemptive apology again, and give a realistic estimated time of arrival. Just showing up late without warning is very poor form.
Okay. What about meetings themselves? How do they typically start?
Meetings rarely dive straight into the core business agenda. There will almost always be a few minutes at the beginning dedicated to small talk.
Weather again.
Often the weather, yes. Or maybe travel. Did you have a good journey? Or a brief, neutral topic. It's about establishing rapport and creating a comfortable atmosphere before getting down to business.
And during the meeting?
Listen attentively. Interrupting someone while they're speaking is generally frowned upon. It's seen as disrespectful, potentially aggressive, and suggests you're not valuing their contribution. Wait for your turn, or signal clearly you'd like to speak.
And the overall communication style in business? Still understated.
Very much so. The general style remains polite, relatively formal, and often quite understated. Overly aggressive, loud, or high-pressure tactics tend not to be well received. They can be seen as unprofessional or even a bit vulgar.
So, subtlety wins.
Subtlety, measured responses, building consensus, these are often more valued than overt forcefulness. Implying things rather than stating them too bluntly is often preferred, especially when dealing with sensitive issues or disagreement.
Which probably means the dress code leans conservative too.
Generally, yes. While it varies by industry, of course, the default in many professional settings, especially client-facing roles or more traditional sectors like finance or law, is still quite conservative. Suits for men, smart business attire for women.
What's the golden rule?
The safe rule of thumb is, it's almost always better to be slightly overdressed than underdressed in a British business context. It signals seriousness, respect for the occasion, and professionalism.
Okay, we've established the what the rules, the words, the actions, and the how to apply them in different situations. But now we really need to get into the why. Where does all this emphasis on propriety, reserve, and complex politeness actually come from? Let's look at the historical and cultural roots.
Right. You really can't understand the current system without looking back. Its foundations are deep and complex, and a huge part of it stems from the historical significance of the class system in Britain.
How did class shape manners so profoundly?
Well, for centuries, British society was incredibly hierarchical, highly stratified by class. And etiquette wasn't just about being nice, it was a powerful social marker, a currency.
How so?
The aristocracy and the upper classes used very specific codes of conduct, the way they spoke, the vocabulary they used, how they held themselves, intricate dining rules as a way to signal their superior status, and frankly, to differentiate themselves from and maintain distance from the lower classes.
So knowing the rules was proof you belonged.
Exactly. The ability to perform these often complex and seemingly arbitrary manners correctly was seen as evidence of good breeding, education, and your rightful place in the social hierarchy. And although the class system is much less rigid today, the legacy of that period absolutely lingers in the continued emphasis on proper behavior, politeness as a signal, and the subtle ways people still judge social cues.
So manners were a form of social control almost, internalized hierarchy.
You could certainly argue that. And this existing framework, this class-based emphasis on behavior, was then massively codified and amplified during the Victorian era in the 19th century.
The Victorians, they were big on rules, weren't they?
Obsessed. They were obsessed with morality, propriety, social order, especially in the face of all the rapid changes brought by industrialization and urbanization. They needed ways to maintain structure.
And this is when we see all those etiquette manuals appearing.
Precisely. Etiquette books became hugely popular. They took many of the existing class-based distinctions and expanded them into incredibly detailed, rigid, widely published codes of conduct for almost every conceivable social situation.
And they gave it a moral dimension.
Yes, often these rules were framed in terms of morality, Christian duty, and maintaining the social fabric. Rules about public decorum, controlling emotions, detailed protocols for visiting, dining, mourning. It all got written down and disseminated widely. This laid the foundation for much of the formality and expectation of structured, non-confrontational public behavior that still exists as a default today.
And underpinning all of this, both the class history and the Victorian influence, is that famous cultural ideal, the stiff upper lip.
Ah, the stiff upper lip, yes. That traditional British, particularly English, value of stoicism, emotional reserve, the ability to remain outwardly calm, composed, and unflappable, especially when facing difficulty or adversity.
And how did that ideal of stoicism directly shape politeness and communication?
It fundamentally dictated that showing strong emotion in public, whether it was excessive joy, overt anger, or deep distress, was generally considered inappropriate, bad form.
Why?
It was often seen as a sign of weakness, a lack of self-control. Politeness, in many ways, became the mechanism through which you maintain that self-control. The reserved demeanor, the careful language, the avoidance of confrontation, it all serves to keep that emotional lid firmly on.
So maintaining reserve is seen as strength.
Yes. And this is why causing or being subjected to a fuss is so disliked. A fuss is essentially uncontrolled emotion breaking through that carefully constructed social shell. It's embarrassing for everyone involved.
It feels like a feedback loop then. The cultural demand to suppress overt emotion necessitates a highly developed system of indirect, ritualized politeness to manage interactions.
Exactly.
And the constant practice of that ritualized politeness reinforces the habit of emotional reserve.
Precisely. The need for subtle signals, coded language, and elaborate deference rituals stems directly from the cultural prohibition on being too direct, too emotive, or too confrontational. They fill the communication gap left by the absence of overt emotional expression.
Okay, that historical context is crucial. But now we absolutely must address the fact that the UK isn't monolithic. We need to talk about regional variations, a patchwork of politeness. Assuming everyone in the UK behaves like a reserved Londoner is a major mistake.
Oh, absolutely vital point. It's something learners and visitors get wrong all the time. The UK is composed of 4 distinct nations: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. While they share some politeness norms, the expression and emphasis can vary quite dramatically. That stereotype of extreme reserve, it's heavily weighted towards England, and particularly the south of England.
So what defines that Southern English, maybe London-centric reserve?
Often, it's characterized by a greater degree of public anonymity and maintaining personal distance. The default assumption is generally not to intrude on strangers. Like we said, striking up a detailed conversation with someone you don't know on the tube is unusual, often met with quiet withdrawal or suspicion. There can almost be a competitive reserve who could be the most self-contained, the least intrusive.
Okay. Now contrast that with Scotland.
Scotland has a strong reputation, often well-deserved, for being very friendly, warm, and hospitable. You're generally much more likely to find yourself in an easy, open conversation with a stranger in a pub in Glasgow or Edinburgh than perhaps in London.
So less reserve.
Often less overt reserve, yes. Importantly, while Scots are certainly courteous and value politeness, they can sometimes be perceived as being more direct in their communication style compared to the typical English reliance on heavy understatement. Clarity might be prioritized more.
And the crucial reminder.
Always remember, Scotland is a distinct country with its own unique history, culture, and identity. Never call a Scot English.
Right. Moving south and west to Wales.
Wales, similarly, is known for great warmth, friendliness, and hospitality. The Welsh word croeso, meaning welcome, is very significant. People are often welcoming to visitors almost instantly.
And anything specific to keep in mind there?
People in Wales are incredibly proud of their distinct cultural identity, especially their language, Welsh. Making even a small effort to learn or use a few basic Welsh words, borda, good morning, diolch, thank you, is usually hugely appreciated. It shows respect for their heritage and can be an instant rapport builder.
Good tip. And finally, across the Irish Sea to Northern Ireland.
People in Northern Ireland are generally known for being very friendly, outgoing, and placing a high value on conversation and humor, often referred to as having good craic.
Let's clarify crack again. It sounds like crack.
It does. It's spelled C-R-A-I-C. It's an Irish term that's central to social life there. It essentially means enjoyable social interaction, lively conversation, witty banter, storytelling, laughter, just generally having a good time together. It's highly valued.
But there's a significant caution here.
Yes. Visitors must be extremely sensitive regarding the region's complex political and religious history. These topics remain highly charged for many people. Unless you know someone very well, it's generally wise to avoid discussing politics or religion to prevent causing unintentional offense or straying into very difficult territory. Sensitivity is key.
Okay. This regional diversity highlights perhaps the single biggest potential blunder.
Confusing the countries, yes. This is the absolute #1 rule. Never, ever under any circumstances refer to someone from Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland as English.
Why is it so bad?
It's not just a simple geographical mistake. It's perceived as ignorant at best and deeply insulting at worst. It completely dismisses their distinct national identity, history, and culture. It violates the fundamental principle of showing respect, which is the bedrock of politeness itself. Get this wrong, and you've failed before you've even started.
Right. So let's quickly synthesize the absolute must-avoids into our faux pas list, the quick takeaway for someone wanting to navigate successfully.
Okay, the top offenders. 1, jump in the queue. As we said, the cardinal sin. Don't do it, ever.
Got it.
2, being too loud in public. Keep your voice down, especially on transport or in restaurants. Respect the generally reserved public atmosphere.
Okay.
3, standing on the wrong side of the escalator. Specifically a London Tube rule, but crucial. Stand on the right, walk on the left. Blocking the walking lane causes mass commuter frustration.
Can right, walk left.
Check. 4, being overly familiar too quickly. Hold back on personal questions, nicknames, or physical contact until a genuine friendship is established. Respect the initial reserve. 5, forgetting your pleases and thank yous. We've hammered this home, but they are the absolute cornerstones. Use them liberally, constantly. They cost nothing and buy goodwill.
And number 6, the big one we just covered.
6, infusing the countries of the UK. Know the difference between English, Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish, and respect those distinct identities. Never call everyone English.
Okay, we've established that British politeness often involves reserve, indirectness, understatement, and avoiding confrontation. And this very specific, highly structured social environment seems to give rise to a particular brand of humor that can often lead outsiders completely scratching their heads. Sarcasm and irony.
Yes, British humor is very often incredibly dry, heavily understated, and frequently relies on saying the exact opposite of what is actually meant. Sarcasm and irony are absolutely pervasive in everyday conversation. They're almost inseparable from the way politeness itself functions sometimes.
Which creates, as the sources call it, the deciphering challenge. If everything is potentially understated or ironic, how on earth does a visitor figure out when someone is being genuine and when they're using sarcasm or irony, maybe as a joke, maybe even as criticism?
It's tricky. It really requires you to listen not just to the words, but to the tone, the context, the slight twinkle in the eye, perhaps. Sometimes it's a deliberately deadpan delivery of something absurd. Sometimes it's using overly formal language in a clearly informal situation. It's about sensing the mismatch between the literal words and the reality of the situation.
But there's often a purpose behind it, right? It's not just random joking. You mentioned the polite function of sarcasm. How does being sarcastic actually help someone be polite?
It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But sarcasm is actually a brilliant tool for expressing things like mild criticism, frustration, disagreement, or even just commenting on a bad situation without resorting to direct, potentially confrontational, or overly emotional language.
How does that work?
It allows the speaker to state the problem or their negative feeling, but wrap it in a layer of irony or humor. This maintains a degree of social distance and prevents the interaction from becoming too heavy or awkward. It avoids causing a fuss.
Give us an example.
Okay, imagine you're stuck in a horrendous traffic jam, going nowhere. Instead of shouting, "This traffic is absolutely terrible, I hate this,"
Mm-hmm.
which is very direct and negative,
Mm-hmm.
a Brit might say, completely deadpan, to their passenger, "Well, this is moving along splendidly, isn't it?" Or, "Oh, good, I was hoping we'd get to spend some quality time admiring this particular stretch of motorway."
Right. Saying the opposite of the reality.
Exactly. It acknowledges the shared misery of the situation, vents a little frustration, but does it with humor and detachment, avoiding negativity and maintaining composure. It's polite complaining.
And understanding this, being able to recognize and maybe even gently participate in this kind of humor is actually key to building rapport.
Oh, absolutely. When a British person starts using that kind of dry, sarcastic wit with you, it's often a very positive sign. It signals that they feel comfortable with you, that they trust you to get their specific sense of humor.
It's a sign of inclusion.
Often, yes. It suggests they feel they can drop the purely formal guard a little bit. And you need to be aware that sometimes a remark that sounds slightly critical or self-deprecating, if delivered with that ironic glint, might actually be intended as a term of endearment or a sign of camaraderie. Deciphering that is key to deeper connection. #tag outro.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground. I think our journey today really confirms that while the code of British politeness can seem incredibly intricate, maybe even baffling at times, underneath it all, it seems rooted in some fairly simple, fundamental desires. Mutual respect, social order, consideration for others, and running through it all, that deep commitment to fairness.
I think that's right. And if there's one core takeaway, one guiding principle to hold on to, it has to be the enduring structural power of that sacred trinity. Sorry, please, and thank you. If you can master the use of those three, not just saying them, but understanding their weight and function, you're not just learning words. You're starting to embrace a whole cultural ethos, one that generally values social harmony over direct confrontation and measured reserve over overt emotional display.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought, something that connects a lot of what we've discussed today, that relationship between emotional reserve and linguistic ritual.
Ah, yes, the chicken and egg question.
Exactly. We talked about the cultural value placed on the stiff upper lip that need to avoid excessive emotional display, and then we saw how this apparent reserve seems to necessitate this incredibly dense, complex system of ritualized, indirect language. The constant sorries, the heavy understatement, the formulas for greetings and thanks.
The language has to do the work that overt emotion might do elsewhere.
Right. These language rituals effectively fill the gap, managing social interactions in the absence of more direct emotional cues. So the question to ponder is, which drives which?
Does the cultural demand for politeness, perhaps shaped by history, class, the desire for order, require the development and use of such indirect, careful communication? Or, conversely, does an inherent cultural tendency towards emotional reserve and stoicism naturally breed the necessity for this kind of highly ritualized, safety-first language to navigate social life without causing friction?
It's a fascinating cultural paradox, isn't it? Where the mechanism, the language, and the underlying engine, the reserve, the aversion to fuss seems to completely intertwine and mutually reinforcing.
It really is. The language is the sophisticated toolkit, certainly. But that deep-seated reserve, that powerful desire to avoid confrontation and maintain equilibrium, feels like the engine constantly driving the need for those specific tools. It's the enduring puzzle at the heart of the British social code.
Food for thought indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the often unspoken language of British politeness. We genuinely hope you feel a little better equipped now to navigate the queue with confidence, decipher an understatement accurately, and maybe even deploy your next preemptive sorry with impeccable timing and style.
Indeed. Until next time.